All right, so voodoo. I'll be honest, my brain goes straight to Hollywood, spooky dolls and all that jazz. But
Right.
we both know there's always more to the story. And you sent over some excerpts from, hold on, I've got the title right here. Voodoo and African-derived spiritual practices.
Yes,
And wow, this deep dive gets really interesting.
it does. It really unpacks a lot of, I think, misconceptions that people have.
Exactly. So that's what we're doing here, going beyond those Hollywood stereotypes
Right.
to look at the real history, the real beliefs, the practices.
And the beautiful tapestry of this tradition, because when we say voodoo, it's not one thing. It's not a monolith. It's more like, if you can imagine, a family tree.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
Okay, so we're talking about West African Vodun as the root.
The root.
And then you have these branches like Haitian Voodoo, Jamaican Obeah, each one shaped by its own journey.
So different expressions of a shared heritage.
Exactly.
Okay, that's already changing how I think about this.
Yeah.
So let's start with, like you said, the root, Vodun. What is at the heart of that tradition?
At its heart, balance. The idea that the spiritual world is inseparable from our daily lives, like two sides of the same coin.
I like that. Okay.
They're always touching, always influencing one another.
Okay. So then where do spirits come in? Because I saw in the excerpts they talk about a supreme deity and all these spirits. How does that all work?
You've hit on a really key point. So while there is reverence for a supreme creator deity, Mawu, the day-to-day isn't so much about worshiping this distant figure. It's about interacting with the multitude of spirits, the Vodun, who influence everything, from the weather to your health.
So it's like having a direct line to, like, the customer service reps of the universe.
Ooh,
Each one kind of specializes in a different department.
I love that. You appeal to these spirits through rituals, through offerings.
Yeah.
And this is all guided by Vodun priests who act as intermediaries.
Fascinating. So
Yes.
you've got this system of balance, you've got this communication with spirits, these priests acting as guides,
Yes.
and then the transatlantic slave trade happens.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that's good for any kind of balance.
No, you're right. The transatlantic slave trade was a horrific tragedy.
Right.
And its impact on the practice of Vodun is immeasurable. But, and here's where it gets even more interesting, it didn't disappear. It was carried across the ocean.
Wow.
It evolved. And that brings us to Haitian Voodoo.
Right, because Haitian Voodoo, to me, has always been so interesting because you have this blend of West African beliefs and Catholicism.
Exactly. And key to that is the Lua,
The Lua.
powerful spirits, intermediaries between humans and the divine. Now, we don't have time to go into all of them, but you might recognize some names. Papa Legba, the gatekeeper who opens the way for communication.
Sorry.
Or Urzuli Freda, the spirit of love and beauty.
Okay, so love.
Right.
I can see why she'd be popular.
Right.
So it's not about worshiping a single god in Haitian Voodoo. It's about these wong.
Yes. And what I find so fascinating is they incorporate Catholic saints
Oh, wow.
right into that framework. So you have Urzuli Dantor, a fierce protector who becomes linked to the Virgin Mary. And then you have St. Peter, keeper of Heaven's Gate, aligning with Papa Legba.
It's like they said, you want us to be Catholic? Fine, we'll just blend it all together.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just about survival, right?
No.
Because Haitian Voodoo played a key role in the Haitian Revolution.
A huge role. And the Haitian Revolution is a testament to the power of Vodou, not just as a spiritual practice, but as a force for social change. Because we have to remember, these weren't just personal beliefs. This was a community.
Right.
United by faith, united by this desire for freedom. And that's where you have events like the Bois Caïman ceremony.
Okay.
So picture this. 1791, tensions are high, and under the cover of night, you have this Vodou ceremony that becomes a rallying cry for rebellion.
Wow.
It wasn't just about, oh, spirits guide us. This was about igniting a revolution. And it was instrumental, this event, in uniting enslaved Africans against their oppressors.
So we're talking about a tradition that provided spiritual comfort.
Yes.
And then also helped overthrow an oppressive regime. I mean,
It's pretty
that is incredible. It's a powerful story.
Yeah.
But our journey through this world, this family tree, it doesn't end there. Because we're talking about all the different branches of this tradition.
Right.
And for that, we're heading to Jamaica, where things get a little less structured, a little more practical.
I like that word,
Yes.
practical. If we're thinking about Haitian Voodoo, with its intricate system of spirits and rituals as this grand symphony orchestra, Obeah is more like jazz. It's improvisational, responsive to the moment, its own unique rhythm. Less about a formal religious structure and more about direct engagement with these spiritual forces for specific needs.
Okay, so less about praising a deity, more about I need help with this particular problem kind of approach.
Exactly. And while Obeah practitioners, they do acknowledge a supreme being, they do acknowledge spirits, their focus is often on manipulating those spiritual forces to address very everyday concerns.
So,
Healing, protection, attracting luck, success.
so if I need to find my lost keys
Exactly.
or ace a job interview, Obi might be the way to go.
Perhaps.
But you also mentioned harm in the source material, and that seems a little different from healing or finding lost keys.
You're right, and that's where I think things get a little more complex. We have to remember that Obeah arose from a place of immense suffering, of oppression.
Right.
So seeking justice, seeking protection when traditional avenues were closed off, the lines can get a little blurry.
Right, because you're trying to find agency in a world that denies you that agency.
Exactly.
So I imagine that kind of power was not looked upon favorably by those in charge.
No, absolutely not. You have Obeah with its focus on manipulating spiritual forces,
Right.
seen as a threat, not just to, let's say, the dominant religion, but to the whole power structure of colonialism.
Because it gave people, especially people who were being oppressed, a way to take back some of that control.
Precisely. Black autonomy, the ability to heal and influence the world outside of these systems of control that had been imposed upon them. And that was a terrifying prospect.
Wow.
And you see that fear play out in the persecution of Obeah practitioners and
Right.
in the attempts to just stamp out the practice entirely.
Which is, when you think about it, not so different from how Vodou has been treated over the centuries.
Exactly.
So despite their differences, there's this shared experience of resilience,
Yes.
of enduring despite attempts to silence them.
Yeah.
But beyond that shared history, what else connects these two branches of this family tree that we're talking about?
Well, at their core, both Voodoo and Obeah are united by this fundamental belief. The world we see is not all there is. They share this worldview where spirits, ancestors, unseen forces are not abstract concepts, but active participants in our lives. And they acknowledge individuals who have the knowledge and the ability to interact with those forces.
So whether it's a Vodou Hungan or an Obeah practitioner, that ability to connect and navigate that world is crucial.
Crucial. These figures hold a very special position, serving as these intermediaries.
It's fascinating, and it makes me think about the concept of healing, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about Band-Aids and cough syrup here.
No.
What does healing look like through the lens of Vodou and Obeah?
It's a great question, and it brings us to how these traditions view illness and well-being. Because we're talking about a much more holistic approach, where physical ailments, they're often seen as symptoms.
Okay.
Symptoms of a deeper imbalance, spiritual disharmony, the presence of negative energy.
So it's not just treating the body, but treating the root cause, which is within someone's spiritual being.
Yes, exactly. And that's where you have the rituals, the offerings, the herbal remedies, all these practices that come into play. And they're not just about alleviating the symptoms, they're about restoring balance, restoring harmony between the individual and this unseen world around them.
Makes you think about different ways of approaching health and well-being.
Right.
Because we're so used to thinking about just like, pills and procedures. But this is a whole different paradigm.
It is.
So I'm curious, with all this talk of adaptation and evolution, are there any core principles or beliefs that stay consistent throughout, all these different expressions? What's the common thread that ties it all together?
That's a great question. And I think despite all of the diversity, the evolution we've been talking about, there are some fundamental threads that run through both Vodou and Obeah.
Okay.
And these aren't necessarily about specific rituals or deities. It's more about kind of underlying principles that shape the worldview of these traditions.
Okay, I'm ready. Lay it on me. What are these core principles?
Well, one of the most important is the concept of respect. Respect for the spirits, for the ancestors, for the balance of the natural world. It's understanding that we are not separate from these forces,
Right.
but interconnected with them.
So it's not about trying to dominate or control the spiritual world, but more about approaching it with respect and humility and understanding.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that we are part of something much larger than ourselves and that our actions have consequences that ripple outward. And this ties into another really crucial principle, and that's responsibility.
Responsibility. Okay, how so?
Well, if you believe that you have the ability to connect with and to influence spiritual forces, that comes with a certain weight. You can't just go around, throwing spells willy-nilly. There's an understanding that your actions have consequences both in the physical and spiritual realms.
So use your knowledge and your power wisely for the benefit of, yourself and the community.
Precisely. It's a much more nuanced and ethical perspective than simply like good magic versus bad magic.
Right.
It's about understanding that interconnectedness of all things and using your power responsibly within that.
It's a powerful message, and it's one that feels incredibly relevant today.
Yeah.
It's like,
It really does.
these traditions, born from such difficult circumstances, have survived. They've adapted over centuries. What can we learn from them? In our own search for connection, for healing, for understanding, the unseen forces that shape our lives, is there wisdom here that we've overlooked?
It's a question worth asking.
It really is.
Oh.
And on that note, I think we're going to have to leave it there for today. But wow, what a deep dive. Thank you for taking us on this journey and for sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible exploration of Vodou and Obeah, going beyond the myths, uncovering the real history, the beliefs, and who knows, maybe sparking a little introspection along the way. For more deep dives into fascinating topics just like this one, make sure you're following the show. And until next time, keep exploring.